Well, look where we are. After a full year, I'm finally here with the most recent Godzilla movie that has released. And the best part is it's not exactly the last, because this year, there's so much on the horizon for Godzilla and into next year. With a brand new Japanese Godzilla film striking theaters this year, an Apple TV series, and of course, we have Godzilla vs. Kong: New Empire. Godzilla vs. Kong happening in the more modern era was a dream come true for a little kid that dreamed so much about seeing the two face off again. In a genre with so many different kaiju, only two were above all: Godzilla and Kong. The difference this time around between Godzilla and Kong facing off is Godzilla had become a much bigger icon. This can be attributed due to the fact that Godzilla had a vast catalog of movies since the original King Kong vs. Godzilla, and had been turned to a hero at one point, and just became a big household name. Bringing these two back together wasn't exactly something that was spur of the moment for Legendary. In fact, there was a failed attempt to bring Godzilla and Kong back together in the early 90s. I can only speculate how this movie would have turned out. To be honest, I believe it would have been a cult classic if it had happened in the Heisei era. That said though, despite the fact that Godzilla and Kong had not shared the screen since the 1960s, I think the two did extremely well. Two different paths, but still remained relevant in the movie industry. In fact, I don't think I want things to be any other way than how things turned out in this universe for the Godzilla series. The path is perfect. The original King Kong vs. Godzilla propelled Godzilla to new heights after a legendary start in 1954. Godzilla raids again? Well, it was just a blueprint for a larger future. But after King Kong and Godzilla went to war in 1962, that was game-changing. King Kong, on the other hand, may have had less films once the Showa era ended for him. However though, his legacy still stands nearly 100 years later. He's a pure pop culture icon. So when are the two most iconic kaiju in movie history gonna clash again? Well, buckle up, because getting this movie is gonna be quite the task. And Godzilla vs. Kong wasn't the only one that was impacted, but the entire movie industry as a whole. In the wake of the success of Godzilla 2014, it was announced that Legendary would begin a shared universe between Godzilla and Kong. This would begin after a few things though, however. A Kong origin film would be released in 2017, Godzilla 2 would strike. This would set the stage for the two meeting in 2020. But there was a major problem though, however. I'm not going to deep dive into it too much, but if you hadn't heard, yeah, there was kind of a major pandemic. Even prior to the pandemic, this film went through a lot of different release dates. From May of 2020 to, hey, we might get this film a little early in March of 2020. Once the pandemic hit though, none of that would be met. Every film was uncertain of when it would go to theaters. Godzilla vs. Kong was no exception. Because of the lockdowns, movie theaters would remain closed, beginning a sad and gloomy year where not much good was happening. But with the movie theaters closed, this opened up the gate for brand new things, which would be bringing new movies straight to the viewers with platforms like Disney Plus and HBO Max, or Max as it's called now. Godzilla vs. Kong was one of the first major films to be brought to the platform and would be game-changing. For me on a local level, Godzilla vs. Kong was the first major movie at my local AMC theater which I cared about. And let me tell you something, the movie theater was flooded with so much excitement to see this movie. In fact, it hyped me just seeing other people excited for the movie. Godzilla vs. Kong was one of the movies that saved cinemas when things looked bleak for recovery for movie theaters. Little movie theaters like this one in Larned, Kansas, where a local professor who's mutual friends with the director of Godzilla vs. Kong, Adam Wingard, and sent him this picture, telling Adam, thanks for the movie that saved the little local movie theater in Larned. It was this movie who brought life into this movie theater with an uncertain future at one point. So if you ever happen to be going through Kansas and you drive through Larned, just remember, hey, there's a little story connected to this film, and I thought I'd share it. My first viewing of this film, I chose to go with movie theaters. Don't get me wrong, streaming is very convenient, but it doesn't hit the same. Something about streaming a brand new movie just doesn't beat the experience where you watch a highly anticipated film with a sold-out crowd at a debut screening. So Godzilla vs. Kong takes place 5 years after the events of Godzilla King of the Monsters, set in 2023. Essentially, Godzilla has proven himself as the alpha, and really there is no one to challenge him. To me, this right here I feel like was a missed opportunity due to the fact that you have all those other kaiju which were killed off, such as Rodan, which I don't think should have been killed off screen. Maybe we could save this for the TV series, however. But really it's just Godzilla on a rampage with no real challenger, no explanation of why Godzilla is on a rampage in the first place for now. Meanwhile, on the other hand, Kong is being watched by Monarch. Only one native remains, in which Kong has a connection with, where she communicates with Kong through sign language. Alright, so while we're on the subject, I want to call myself out about something. I was one of the people that believed that we were going to get a Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla plotline. I think you know what I'm talking about. Where what we saw maybe wasn't exactly the real Godzilla, and I was dead wrong. More on that in a moment. In the meantime, our Hollow Earth theory will be taken much further as the humans look to discover the secret power in the center of the Earth and find the origin of the Titans. With this plot point in motion, this means that King Kong will become into play now. King Kong will be used as a guide, but we have to get him down to the outpost in Antarctica first of all. I don't know about you guys, but I always felt really bad for Kong in this scene due to the fact that he's got everything against him. Godzilla's raw strength, his atomic breath, and Kong just doesn't do well in the water. But the best part about the presentation here is Kong is no pushover. Even if he's the underdog, he will not bow to the king of the monsters. So how do we transfer Kong without Godzilla murdering him? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go by air. Pure throwback to King Kong vs. Godzilla. God bless it. Make our way to the Hollow Earth, and this film is just pure visually astounding. And really, that's what this movie does well. It was at this point in the film I was thinking, this is a brand new chapter for this series. We found the origins of Kong and Godzilla, and I can't wait to see all the new kaiju. There's still lots of questions, like what is the source of light down here, and how this ecosystem thrives. There is one thing though about this film at this point that I kind of notice. It kind of shows that Kong probably wouldn't have survived down here because hell, he's almost mauled and murdered by a warbat. Let's be honest, if the humans hadn't intervened, Kong would have died before Godzilla torched him. But that's kind of anticlimactic, right? The movie spends a decent amount of time following the characters Bernie, Madsen, and Josh as they sneak their way into Apex and discover Mechagodzilla. Okay, so I want to talk about something. I was kind of shocked that Mechagodzilla was even in this film. I don't believe there were a lot of signs. I mean, yes, there was a few toy lines that leaked, but really though, I didn't look too much into details and spoilers of what was going on when this movie was releasing. I speculated we'd rehash ideas from Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, but I just was thinking, nah, it's not gonna happen. That's just my speculation. So let's talk about Mechagodzilla. My reaction towards the design and the actual character in this movie was kind of mixed to negative, but anymore now, it's just mixed to positive the more I watch this film. I like to describe the design as a mix between Transformers and Terminator, especially that face. It has a heartless facial design. You see, in contrast to the last version of Mechagodzilla we saw, this one has no conscience. It is just a soulless killing machine with no regard to life. And as badass and deadly as the Skullcrawlers were in Skull Island, they're no match for the new Mechagodzilla. The scary part, this isn't even Mechagodzilla's full power on display. This is just a taste. Alright, so I'm not going to detail the lot of the film in depth, but I do want to talk about a few things. This movie advertised there will be a clear winner, which it actually delivers. We do get a winner, but jokes on Godzilla as he gets beaten down by his mecha counterpart. Which kind of turns this movie into one of those the enemy of my enemy is my friend AVP type concepts. Which is likely done to make both fans happy because of the fact that Kong looks hella weak until Godzilla gets clapped, and then Kong has to actually do something. I don't want to shortchange Kong, because it is purely amazing and badass to watch him fix his own arm and get back into battle. Mechagodzilla is a threat to nature. Godzilla and Kong must band together. In the visual department, this film is a spectacle. You gotta have that right monitor and a 4K version of this film to get a full treat, but even if you're watching on Blu-ray, it's still something beautiful. Visually, this is an appealing film as we watch Godzilla and Kong duke it out in Hong Kong. It's so damn vibrant, neon colors which match the soundtrack. Which, if you want a description, it's more of an electronic digital vibe. So for this film, visuals and atmosphere, it's just purely astounding. I can't help but say that. If you're wondering about how this film conducts itself in terms of fights and battle sequences, I gotta say I believe it delivers. Everything just feels natural and my eyes are on the screen every time I see Godzilla and Kong battling, and even when Mechagodzilla comes into play. Human characters, on the other hand, feel far less developed and just forgettable in this film. That's one major gripe. And if you were to ask me, is this a film that I feel is suitable for new fans to get into the series? I think so. It's a roller coaster from start to finish and it's easy to watch. Anytime I watch it, I just hope the ball isn't dropped when we continue to add more to the Hollow Earth, which in future films, this could make this film even more special once we add on to new lore behind the Hollow Earth. So in short, Godzilla vs. Kong has a few missed opportunities, yes it does. But it still excels as a passable film because at least it gave viewers what they wanted. A battle with a clear winner after months of Godzilla vs. Monkey memes, which was a gold mine to open up my Facebook and see these memes flooding in my timeline. Seriously, go watch this film, give it a watch, give it a stream, however you prefer to watch movies. It's a ride. It's a film I see and I reflect on how much everything sucked in 2020. But in 2021, it was a fresh breath of life in the cinema after all the lockdowns. The people needed this. Whether you were a hardcore kaiju fan, or just some casual viewer that needed some entertainment. I know I needed it. It was a good time to get out there and socialize with new and old friends, where I could indulge myself and share my kaiju hobby, all thanks to this movie. So props to Godzilla, props to Kong, not just for being my childhood heroes, but the heroes that I needed in 2021, where people could have good times and unite in common interests. This concludes my take on Godzilla vs. Kong and all the other Godzilla movies. However though, the fun does not end there, because there's many more things that I want to get into. On the horizon, I want to talk about Prey, Mothra, the Godzilla series, and I will be starting the Jurassic Park series soon. This has been Glenn Destruction, catch you around!